I think you said 27.
Welcome to Stories of the Soul radio show. Today is September the 26th, 2021. Today, the 49ers is going to beat the Green Bay Packers. Woo, go Niners! Oh boy, we have a good show for you today. I'm so excited. We're going to be talking about colorism, and we're going to be addressing and talking about colorism as it relates to interracial marriage and the history behind it. We're also going to be addressing it from a sibling's perspective and societal bias. I have in studio today two special guests. Um, they have been here before, so I want to welcome back Minister Timothy Webster, and I want to welcome back Miss Clarissa. And I'm not going to say her last name because I messed it up terribly last time, so I'll let her say her last name. Welcome, welcome, you guys. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for being part of my show. I wanted to address colorism because it's near dear to my heart. My earliest memory of colorism was when I was in middle school. I went to Pelton Middle School out of San Francisco, California. And I remember being traumatized by a lot of the men, well, the young boys and the teachers, because they treated the light skinned girls better than the darker skinned girls. And although I'm not dark, there's different shades. I just was a darker shade, and they treated them, different. And from that, I developed my own bias, right? I felt like, well, why do they get special treatment? And it's ironic because one of my school friends, she actually was light skinned. Her mother was white and her dad was black. But me and her was really good friends. So it wasn't so much of a dislike. It's just that they got preferential treatment. And then I also had bias towards people who married outside the race. So we're going to address that. So in the dictionary, colorism states it's prejudice or discrimination against individuals with a dark skin tone, typically among people of the same ethnic or racial group. Then in parentheses, it says colorism within the Black community has been a serious emotional and psychological battle. I'm going to jump in and let Minister Webster talk, and then I'll come back and share some more things that's going to make us all laugh. All right, go ahead, Minister Webster.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
It's funny that you read that definition because I always like to read definition of words.
You sound
And
muffled.
you typically want to open up, with just giving information on defining what a word means. And I think colorism is one of those words where, it's not a common word. We hear racism more or discrimination or prejudice, but it's interesting because it says prejudice or discrimination against individuals with a dark skin tone, typically among people of the same ethnic or racial group. The I believe colorism, the term was dated back, I think, in the 80s when it was officially labeled kind of as a term that we use. But I definitely think that colorism is nothing new. I mean, I think it's something that's been going on for hundreds of years. And it's a complicated thing because it's embedded in our foundation and our component and who we are because we see it in every aspect. You gave an example of when you were younger and how the lighter different shades of women got preferable treatment. But and you said that you developed a bias from that. But I also believe there are 100 other bias you develop from exterior things you saw in society too, in addition to your personal experience. I mean, we all have those. Ever since I can remember, I've always liked lighter better, and I have always wondered why, and just why do I have a preference for light over dark? And a lot of times I just kind of develop like this. Oh, it's natural. Maybe that's just how I am, but it's not. How I've been conditioned. It's how I've been influenced from the things that I see in media and TV and books, even within within the black race. There has been, from what I can see, preferable treatment to those who are more light skinned. So I definitely think colorism is something that's real, and it's going to take a lot of, I think, a lot of talking about, bring a lot of awareness, a lot of information, a lot of research, like anything else, and keep talking about it and grow to the point where we can become aware and change as a society.
Yes, I totally agree with that. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes. Yeah, I can
Okay.
hear
I hope that they can hear you good, Tim, because you was sounding a little muffled to me and it was hard for me to kind of hear exactly what you said. But I will say that I remember when you were younger and even as a teenager, people would often say to me, they would ask me if you were all black. And I didn't understand why they was asking me that. I'm like, well, why are you asking me that question? I'm like, yeah, his daddy black is whatever, you know. And the ironic thing is, because of my ignorance, when I got pregnant with you, I prayed every single day that you would be light skinned. Now, I know somebody might not believe me, but that is the honest God's truth. I sure did, you know. And it was just because, like I said, people who were light skinned, from my perspective, got peripheral treatment. The boys, they gave a lot of the light skinned girls or mixed girls a lot of attention. So I didn't understand. It wasn't their fault, you know, they didn't ask to be born, you know. And I think I would, the reason, the purpose I did this show is just kind of educate people, because even as an adult, you still see it today. You know, when I graduated from high school, I was the salutatorian of my class. And in actuality, I should have been a valedictorian. And it is my honest belief that I wasn't picked is because the young lady who they picked to be the valedictorian was light skinned. You know, she was mixed. And the reason why I say that is because I had a higher GPA than she did, you know, but hey, you know, what can you do? And that's just a couple of instances that, you know, I can talk about, you know. So Tim, I have a question. You are in an interrelational marriage. You know, your wife is Hispanic. Have you received any bias from that? Have you gotten any questions or kind of dirty looks when you and your wife have been out, either in the past or, you know, current?
You know, honestly, I can say being in the Bay Area, um, not so much in public. Some of the most probably bothersome things I've experienced have been internal within the family. Um, and it can be things as certain comments, right? You know, people make a comment, perhaps quote unquote playful. Um, but there's been hints because my wife is not black. And so, you know,
Hmm.
without saying names, right, or people, right? But it's just, I would say my closer inner circle, I've heard things from, right? Now, I'm sure there's people out on the outside that has made comments or they've said things, but nobody's, we're in the Bay Area, it's not nothing to just walk up to you and say something. I haven't experienced that, but I have experienced some, you know, some comments, if you will, from, you know, my family members.
As being a father of children that are mixed, have you experienced any type of you know, I guess bias, as you know, with them being in school, like when you go to pick up your children in school or when you first enrolled them, did you feel any type of like, oh, you know, that's their dad?
You know, that's a that's a really complicated question because I can't give like a definitive yes or no. All I can tell you is what I feel, right? And what I feel can't be verified with facts, but our feelings are there for a reason, right? Just things such as like, you know, I go up to the school and I'm asking, you know, for some tissue, and they're like, "Well, who are you? You know, what's your kid's name? You know, like I'm the only black dad up here. You don't know who I am. Yeah, I've come up here many times, like stuff like that, or certain interactions with parents. it doesn't feel authentic or like they want to engage, right? But I could say for the most part, it's kind of covered, and it's like colorism, racism will be more of that because there's only like four black kids that go to this school. Would be a different situation, right? A different direction within the topic. But I don't really know their experiences, but as far as me, what I've experienced, there hasn't been a lot of interactions or a lot of things where I can say specifically, hey, they're dealing with, the colorism issue, if that makes sense. But
Yeah,
I do think there's something there to some degrees, but I just can't put my finger on it or address it directly.
you're right. You know, it's crazy because I remember when I found out that you were gonna have Soraya, my first granddaughter, and I remember thinking to myself, I said, I don't even know if I'm gonna love my own grandchild. And when I went to the hospital and saw her, it wasn't even a second thought. I loved her. I love her still. And I have a different view. And it's all about really just being educated. This is not a conversation that you typically have with your children. No one ever talked to me within my family, within my community, or schools about colorism and kind of what that may look like. I don't think that I ever shared with like my mother or anybody that I experienced those feelings. But even within the family, I have a couple of family members who were just recently told me that because they have a sibling, one is light and one is a darker color. And they told me that people within our family treated them different. Now, of course, I didn't see it, I didn't notice, right? But they said they felt they got treated differently. And like one sister told me that people would always tell her sister, "You so pretty, you so cute." But then when they get to her, you know, those things aren't said. And so I honestly believe that colorism shouldn't be an issue, especially within the black community, because we all are one, right? And if it's not addressed, it will continue to happen. I heard somebody call one of my relatives a name. They call him a black spot. Now, I know that they don't mean harm, and I know that they mean it in a joking way. But do people ever consider that other person's feelings, right? And I'm just happy today that I'm no longer ignorant to color. I don't, I'm gonna be honest. I don't even see color. It doesn't matter to me if you light, if you dark, but I did think that that was funny when I was pregnant with you. And the ironic thing is, Timmy, you came out light. And it wouldn't have mattered if you was light or dark. I still would have loved you the same. And I'm sure there's other people who've had biases within their own family. And in a couple of minutes, I'm gonna let Clarissa chime in and kind of talk about that. There was one more question I wanted to ask you
Can I
before I let Clarissa come
ask you
in.
a question on something you just said?
What you say?
Can I ask you a question on something you just said?
Yes.
Um, Lord have mercy, I just forgot what you just said. I had two questions. You had talked about um, you would you would love them. You said something earlier about the grandkids, about my children, and you said you
You about
didn't.
the grandkids?
You said that you didn't know. This was my first question. I forgot the second one. You said that you didn't know if you were going to love them, and I would ask you, do you know why? And I'm only saying that because I think she'll be 12 in January. This was just 12 years ago, right? And so I'm kind of, tagging it to if this was 12 years ago, meaning you was an adult for some time, and we were talking about just kind of bringing awareness to it. Why did you even feel that way, being my mom, having your children,
Yeah,
me?
sure. Well, number one, you married a Latino woman.
Mhm.
And not that it matters. I feel like who you love is who you love. I was surprised. I thought you would have married somebody that was of your same race. And for me, I support you, my children, to the best of my ability. You love who you love. But because I was still ignorant 12 years ago, because for me to even think that, because it did come to my mind, I was like, oh wow, my own grandchild is going to be a mixed child. And it wasn't that I disliked anybody or hated anybody. It was just they got peripheral treatment. And I've been feeling this way for a very long time. Even in the workplace, there's different instances where, things have happened and that I've just seen over the years. And so I just remember saying to myself when I found out she was pregnant, I just didn't know how I would feel. And I will say that I'm grateful to God that I don't have a bias towards my own grandchildren, because believe it or not, there are people who do. I
Now,
mean,
I got another question to throw at you, and I'm only it's coming to my mind when I'm talking to you. Uh, Now, just to throw this at you, if they are light skinned,
I can't hear you.
if your grandchildren are mixed and they are light skinned, and you do believe light skin has preferable treatment, right? I want to throw this at you. Would that not be an advantage or more in favor of the colorism that's already been developed in you?
Mm, No, it's funny that you say that, because I worry about them, but not in a sense of to the point of where I'm stressing. But I
Uh-huh.
always tell them that they're beautiful inside and out. And I worried that people who were like me will also treat them a little different,
Uh-huh.
because there are mixed, they're beautiful girls in my eyesight,
Right.
and so you're gonna have people, unfortunately, kids who are not educated, right? If you don't talk about it, you don't know. Well, why do they have, this type of, hair, and I don't have this type of hair,
Right.
or like I said, I remember my earliest memory is in middle school, but I'm even thinking about um when I was in elementary school, um, at Dr. Charles R. Drew School. My grandmother, Bertha Bishop, worked there, and I remember me and this boy named Walter. I wonder is Walter still alive? Shout out to you, Walter. And we were in the little playroom playing house. Now we weren't doing anything, but she caught me giving him a kiss, and boy, I got a whooping on my life. And I remember her saying, she had to be it had to be that old dirty Walter or something like that, but he was darker, you know skinned. He was more or less like your dad color. So I mean, that's a good question to ask. I'm just glad that I'm aware, and I just want to address it, so that, yeah, you can talk. Yeah, you can say something. Yeah. Okay, so I have Curtis in studio. He wanna ask.
Hey man, I just wanted to say God bless everybody. This is a very good conversation.
Can y'all hear him?
Your mother's doing a great job, and the topic is really good and powerful. Brother Timothy, you're very smart, brother. The question that you're asking is amazing. That's why I had to say something. So what happened is, back in the day, the slave owners, they kept the darker slaves in the first house and the lighter slaves in the back house. It's a trip that y'all having this conversation because I just spoke to a brother about this. So what would happen was the darker slaves would run to the master first and say, "Oh, hey, they're leaving out the camp." So it's always been confusion between the darker um, African Americans and the lighter African Americans. That's why I'm glad your mother is having this show, because she's talking about the soul. This is some stuff that is deep. It's really deep. So I just wanted to interject on that so you guys know it's this been going on so long. Hey man, that's all. I just wanted to touch. I don't want to take the show, but that was y'all doing very good.
Amen. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. So I'm going to switch it over to Miss Clarissa. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you, and I apologize for I'm having multiple technical difficulties here this morning. It is we're rolling with it though. Thank you so much for having me on the show again. I'm really excited to be here this morning.
So, I wanted to talk to you. So, you have siblings, is that correct?
I do actually. I have a lot of siblings. So I have and we don't get into the half whole whatever, but just for, clarity. I have a brother and a sister. I'm the oldest, and the second child of my age out of 8 children altogether. So I have a brother and a sister from both parent. We share two biological parents. So one younger brother, one younger sister, and then I have 3 stepsisters. Two of those stepsisters are biracial. They are mixed with Caucasian, Black, and one stepsister who is all white. Their mother is white. And then I have a brother and a sister who we share the same father and have a different mother who is white.
Okay. Well, my
So
question for
this is
you.
a real, let me tell you, I could do this all day. I really could.
Well,
And then
good.
I had talked to you before. My son is biracial. My son is half white.
Well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about some of the experiences you've had, you know, growing up in a, I was about to say interracial, but with your current situation and with your son, let's whatever you want to talk about. We here for it.
Sure. I mean, first of all, I just want to say I appreciate the conversation. I think a lot of folks in our community don't even want to broach it, right? Because we want to be unified as a people, and we want to, and I think it's unhealthy for us to pretend like these tensions don't exist, right? So this is deeply healing, sister, and I think you are doing, and Brother Webster are doing very well. Excuse me, the type is tiny. I'm on a phone. It's about to die, y'all. So if I get cut off, I will be right back. But we're gonna keep going because this is such an important conversation. So, this my where to even begin? I mean, I want to start by saying, by not elevating these tensions, we harm everybody. And there's very, in my history, clear harm to me due to colorism. But the way that I just want to talk a little bit about really quickly, the way that I think about colorism is actually, we have to, it's a place where we're attacking each other as a result of white supremacy. You know what I mean? We're attacking. And I really appreciate Curtis coming in, Brother Curtis coming in and talking about, it's the roots of slavery, because, when you think about, and your story about, not getting valid Victorian, Black, the darker our skin was, the more we were supposed to be put in the field. We're seen as lazy because that is a way to get us to work for free and exploit our labor. We were seen as stupid because it was illegal for us to read. I mean, all of this is about basically how these are all leftover from chattel slavery. And I think we can't even address, it's colorism is one arm, right, of white supremacy that's been used to both separate us as a people, and also gloss over the fact that Black women were systematically raped and bred, right, for that labor. That is a part of, not to, I mean, it really, really is a part of it. And so, that, so we've been, sort of internalized that this proximity to whiteness means intelligence, it means affluence, it means privilege. And to, who wouldn't want that for themselves, to protect themselves? Because being Black means being unsafe in this country to this day. It is all, being dark skinned means unsafe to this day, and or has meant being unsafe. And so, and I definitely have internalized some of that myself. My family is from Moss Point, Mississippi, and well, my grandfather's side, but that was the side most prominent in my life. I was raised by my grandparents for a large majority of my childhood. My grandparents, aunties, and uncles definitely come from a family that was, part of a community. Our neighborhood was Black. Black working class neighborhood. And I just want to be very clear, we the whole neighborhood came from the same city in the South, the same town. So it was an insular community. And even with that, we weren't even allowed to have white dolls. We couldn't, if there was a such thing as black cartoons in the 80s, we would have just watched that. We wouldn't have, you couldn't even talk to my grandparents about anything white. You know what I mean? I mean, they didn't want us to, they wanted us as much as possible to be incredibly proud of our heritage and where we came from, because they escaped Moss Point, Mississippi with their lives. My grandfather left so he wouldn't be lynched. I mean, that's why I'm here, is because my grandfather joined the military at 17 because he was like, either they're going to kill me or I kill them, but I'm not going down on my knees. And so that's why I'm here. And even with that, even with all that pride, even with all that history, even with all of that, sense of we have to advance as a people, my grandfather was telling me, listen, you have to put castor oil on your hair so that it grows and it'll straighten out, right? And my grandfather came from a family where half of the folks, again, because of the reason why I mentioned slavery and the sexual assault that led to the variation in our skin color after Africans were kidnapped from their land and brought here. Half of my grandfather's family is very, very light. Very, very light. They're black and they are very light. My grandfather's very dark, was a dark-skinned man, and he was treated very differently. He was abused and treated horribly. And he talked about this, and though he loved all of us, my little sister, like I said, there's three of us. Most of us have my skin tone or darker or maybe slightly lighter. My little sister, who we have the same mother and father, she is light skinned. And when I mean, and she was, I wouldn't say she was favored, but she definitely, there was an aspect of, there was definitely differential treatment in terms of, not just the way that I looked and the way that she looked, and I gotta say, I felt very loved from my grandparents, very loved. But my grandparents were like, you're a leader, you're a speaker, you're powerful, you're going to do things in the world, but never you're beautiful. And daughters and granddaughters, we need to be told we're beautiful. We need to be cherished and loved. We deserve, right, to be seen as precious. But I was the tough one. I'm tough. I will tell you about yourself. I'm the one who, when something needed to be done in the family, even whether it was age appropriate or not, I was called on to do it. I was seen as the practical one. I was seen as the grounded one. And my sister was allowed to be a child. Part of it was because she's the baby, right? She's the younger one. And part of it is because, there is this view of the closer you are to whiteness, the more feminine, right? The more feminine and more fragile or precious. And that was to her detriment too. I also want to say she suffered from that too, because she wants to be seen as taken seriously and as a whole person, and not the color of her her skin, excuse me, not the color of her skin. And so there's resentments that happen in families when you're treated differently. I'm like, wait a minute, I want pink dresses. I don't want to be seen as someone who just, I'm here as everybody else's servant, which is how I felt growing up. I felt like, as a darker skinned daughter, I'm here to do the work, not be loved on.
Can I
Okay,
ask you a
sorry.
question?
Yeah.
I wanted to the way you
We can't,
Uh-oh.
Tim. We can't
of
hear
It's
you.
cutting
We can't
out.
hear you.
as a result of that differential treatment, because you were not labeled or recognized maybe equally as beautiful. And the reason I say that is because my brain is thinking of uh, that aggressive black woman um,
Yes.
that is that way by result of hurt, but also you're stronger in all those other areas that's not tagged to beauty because you have to, and that's because that's what's being fueled. Or you're the strong one, you're the mature, you keep your family together. It's like, and you're like, well, I know all that, but I'm beautiful too, right? Right?
Right.
Because I would like to believe, I don't know your sister, your siblings, but I like to believe they're just as strong as you are, and they just maybe not in the same way, but they were not quite labeled as that because they're lighter or they're beautiful, right?
Yeah.
And you're saying something very interesting because we do attach success to whiteness in so many different ways. Like, I've gotten into disagreements with my own. Well, you acting white. Let me get it straight. Because a brother working
Right.
hard, a
Right.
brother making money, because I'm thinking logically how the white man thinks and won't teach us. I'm being, if I am acting white, then you need to act white too. But why are we attaching success to whiteness?
That's
So
right.
that gets back into kind of what Curtis chimed in and mentioned earlier, as far as this been going on since I believe the beginning of slavery, right? It's not something that's new, and it's so embedded in our foundation and how we're constructed. It's really hard because I was feeling conflicted when you were talking because even I have given compliment. I love little girls. I am favorable to little girls than I am little boys, right?
Mhm.
And I've noticed a lot of the time it's typically the girls with straight hair or they're
Yeah.
light skinned, and it's a battle for me because it's like, well, what about the little chocolate one over there? And so she's beautiful too, right? And so, but the reason I know it's an embedded issue is because I have to fight myself,
Mm.
right? Because if it was true equality, I should just do it to everybody the same equally, whether your hair nappy, whether you're straight, whether you got barrettes, whether it's pressed, regardless of the shade, right? But I even struggle with that, and I think that I've affected young women without even knowing it. I've
Mhm.
fed right into that because I'm telling one they're beautiful, but like you said, I'm not saying it to the other ones, right? And I think we all have put. I'm confident your parents probably have no idea if they're not being intentional about it, that they may have said your lighter skinned sister more reference to her physical attraction. We're not even aware of it.
Well, and I think there one conversation, one piece of this is that we are so busy having to fight against what we are not, right? We are not lazy, we are not stupid, we are not etc. We are not prone to poverty, and we're right. We're so busy having to not assume individual responsibility for systems that were absolutely set up, right? A couple hundred years ago, that we have to. I think this is, and this, I think this is a moment to do it. Explore what we are, right? What we are is beautiful. Black is beautiful. There was a moment in history where black is beautiful was a slogan, natural hair, afros, all our culture, and embodying what it means to be black in a black body and celebrated in a black body is something that is so threatening to white supremacy. I mean, because imagine if we all stepped into our power in that way. Sure, we could absolutely build empire enterprise like the white man. Listen, we tried to do that and got bombed every time we did it, right? We want to talk about Tulsa, Oklahoma. We want to talk about we want to talk about who actually built Wall Street, because black liberty, autonomy, and celebration of black bodies is so threatening. And so beyond just and black women, I think it's seen as being beautiful and feminine, being important, of course, to the self-esteem, but there's also something about being valued as a human being, which we have a history of not. That's
Right.
also it's really, really important in that conversation. And so my son is biracial. That is a whole story. So there was also, and let me go back and say one more thing about this, because I did talk about having a whole rainbow family. Okay, I mean, for real, people say that, but I really have one, and love them. And I've seen some of the challenges, right, and some of the differences in parenting biracial children or children as a black mother and as a white mother. And I'm not saying positive or negative, but that's a new one. I don't think we even have time to go deep into that. Maybe that's a whole other show. But there's nuances and differences there that we have to look at, because as a mother of a biracial son, his experience, to continue to build on what you were saying, his experience as a biracial child was absolutely attached to having a mother with dark skin, right? Especially at one point, economically disadvantaged mother with dark skin, and all the stigma that goes with that, which I talked about on the last show. So he was treated like any other Black child in these school systems. And when they saw me, when they saw me, they were like, well, he was, seen as a problem, or he had ADHD. There was always something, because it was assumed that there was something deficient in my parenting, right? And because he was attached to me, his experience of being in public school systems, which is why we work on reparations for Black students right now. So even though my son is very fairly light skinned with kinky hair, his identity is also very wrapped up in his experience of being parented by someone who, I can't decide how I show up. I show up the way I show up, right? No matter how I speak, or the exposure to, job opportunities or education that I have, I'm still he is attached to someone who is navigating this world, right? With the baggage of a Black, or sometimes what we could consider baggage or a burden of being a Black woman. So, and he, for a long, now he's saying, I'm biracial for a long, and he, has not grown up around his white family. He's grown up around my family. And his father is absolutely active and in the picture. However, he has, he's not been exposed to that culture in a real deep way. I'll also say that he really struggled in school because, he had to fight. The number of times I was going up, he had to fight. He was tested constantly, right? Because he was light skinned. And then, for better or worse, one of the things that I instilled in him values wise was, you don't get to think you're better. You just don't, right? There are going to be privileges that you have because of systems that exist. There's space that you don't get to take up. There's people you don't get to speak for, even though you're part of the culture. You just will be given specific privileges on the basis of your skin. And you have to be aware of that so that you don't harm other folks. Yeah, please.
At what age did you have this discussion with him?
Immediately.
See, the big difference is, sometimes we have people or parents who have this conversation with their children, but then you have some people who do not. And the question that I have is, at what age do we address this or educate our children? It's the same thing. Like, I was thinking about, I have a daughter that was 2.5 years old. She passed away when she was 2.5 years old. No one had never really talked to me about death and dying and how to really handle that situation. And for me, I try to do things differently. There's an old saying, when you know better, you do better, right? And I would like to just educate our people. What are some of the things that we can do to kind of talk to our children, right? Because children become teenagers become adolescents become, middle and older adult. How do we address that early on? And I'll be right back. Okay, go ahead.
That's for me, it's a complicated thing. If you can mute your phone for me, Clarissa, it just gives a lot of feedback. I was gonna say, thank you. I was gonna say, it's a challenging thing because to a certain degree, there's certain things that it's almost like I don't want to introduce to my children. Uh,
Yeah.
but the irony is they're going to be introduced anyways. So I'm actually
There.
in the process of changing my thought process, my framework, and I have two teenager sons who say things that I prefer not to hear as father. That comes from the result of discrimination and colorism. So I
Yeah.
realized, okay, there's something different that I need to do. And a lot of their ignorances, if I could be completely transparent, it comes, I have those same and had those same ignorances too. So I'm not going to act like, oh my God, right? Because I felt the same way. But it's the fact that they're not even kind of aware of it when it comes to this colorism issue. And they're mixed young men as well. And so, with my daughters, my approach will be different. One of the things I've done is I've stopped complimenting them as much about their physical beauty and attraction, because I want them to value who they are. And they're still beautiful, and I'm not saying they're not, but I try to find focus more on their skills, loving them for who they are. And when this whole thing recently with the whole the Black Lives Matter movement that we were seeing a lot in the news, I even started to just have these conversations with them as far as like, do you experience these different things? And they're just like, we don't really know. My kids don't even really know when I try to say, what's your race or what's your, and they're kind of like, we're American, mixed, Latin, and they don't even really definitively will say that they're Latin or they're black. They'll just say that I'm Latin, I'm mixed, right? And I've noticed that my middle daughter will say I'm Latin more, right? So I'm listening to, okay, why is she saying Latin more over black, right? Is it because being Latin more embrace, it's more faith? I'm not sure what it is, but I think just kind of talking to them about it at their appropriate level and just asking questions, because that's all I could do. But I know their minds is thinking. I know ideologies are forming, perceptions are developing, and all I could do is just try to, I think being proactive and not waiting until something happens to respond to it, but be very proactive about my approach at just talking about Black history in general, racism, discrimination, giving them that education ahead of time, so when it comes, they know how to combat it, instead of them having it and not really being familiar territory and then trying to develop these ideas without some proper alignment and education. I hope that made sense.
That made complete sense. And I just want to really appreciate you for being so vulnerable, because I really feel like we have to have these conversations, because, whether it's when's the appropriate time to talk about engaging with the police, right? When is it the appropriate time to talk about any number of issues? And also how are we responding to movements? Because what's happening politically right now is pushing, right? Pushing us to address it. And then also there's such a lack of control of the information on the internet that is so harmful, that we have the ability to unpack and analyze with our kids. My son says crazy stuff to me too. Not to be I hate using that word, but I mean, really, some of the stuff he asked me about, I'm like, where did you hear that? Who is saying those things? And so I think it's important. And I was very, very, I made it a very big point to make sure that he knew he was. I think I was almost too hard on him. I mean, it's something that I definitely regret. I almost, I could have made him feel a little more special. I do feel like, I was very much like, you're with the people. You're not special. Study hard. We work hard. And I think that there could have been a lot more nurturing, but at the same time, to your point, I didn't have access to that nurturing myself. There was no one nurturing me, right? I'm
I was just getting ready
repeating.
to say that. I was just getting ready to say that.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't, to where his dad was like, there's no way you can spoil a young child, right? But I felt that in my mind, I felt like, well, I don't want him to be spoiled. He's going to be the only child. He's light skinned. He's going to think that the world's going to be handed to him. And that's just not true. I really projected a lot of my own stuff on him. And so there are parts of him that are hard, right? That are hardened, that we're working so even for me, it's like I think that there were things that I think I drilled down too much. And one other thing that came to me that I wanted to lift up, talking about Black Lives Matter, because it is a global movement. I'm thinking about our brothers and sisters in Jamaica that are bleaching their skin, right? That are or even India that are bleaching their skin. Colorism is something that we see. Actually, it's not just in the United States. It is actually an international thing. And what does that mean? That to have dark skin globally is the least desirable thing possible. You have Afro Latinx folks, right? We have African people all over the world because of diaspora. And so you have, whether it's Vietnam, India, it does not matter almost what country. It seems that even in China, I've read in certain parts, there is the worst thing you could be that could happen to you is you could be brown, you could be dark brown, or at the very, the very worst, you could be black. And what does that mean? Also, when we're thinking not just within the United States, but outside. And so I'm just hoping that we can find grace with ourselves around these issues, like find some grace, because it's not that we are defective or uneducated, or it's that we've been harmed, been harmed by a system that has been set up to hold a certain standard as supreme, right? And we could get into why, but that's another show again. But I just hope that we are I appreciate your vulnerability, and also that we are being gentle, and that maybe the way to talk about this with our young people is through that lens, is that if we have these beliefs, yes, they can cause harm if they're not unchecked. I mean, really, they can.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that you are a bad person with bad character. That is not what that means.
Right. So I kind of want a couple things come to my mind about relationships in interracial marriage or marriage within the same race but light skin. My sister had a disagreement about 2 years ago, and it was interesting because in the disagreement we were arguing about, I thought one thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in her ranting and expressing herself, she's bringing up the colorism issue. And I'm like, well, what does that have to do with it? And at the end of it had to do with something that I have said and things that I have always said. That's a colorism issue. Now, for me, I could say I'm playing, but I had to challenge myself. Well, if you're playing, why you say it all the time? Even though jokes have truth to them too, right?
Yeah.
And those were feeding into her, and over a period of time, they were offending her. And there's different things that she can see within the family that, even though I don't think it was the right time in the context we were arguing, but I had to really reckon with the things she said. And a lot of the stuff that she said were facts. They were truth, right? Regardless if I wanted to deal with them or not. I didn't create the issue, but I'm making it worse. And I think segueing into me wanting to comment on why I think, especially for the Black woman, is such a challenge, is because these ignorances, they can be reinforced, but they also can appear more worse when we look at history and society, right? And I typed up, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, Minister Farrakhan. Obama is probably the only exception. But both my pastors and all the influential people and the seemingly successful Black men that we can say are successful, their wives or a shade like me or lighter.
Yes.
So there also is that perspective of, it's even validated in who we decide to marry, because it's the prominent Black man. When I say prominent, I believe everybody's important, but I'm talking about that plateau where there's a financial success, or there's publicity, or there's popularity in different fields. A lot of my own men are married to light skinned women, and they're not just light skinned men, they're chocolate men, they're middle chocolate, caramel, whatever you want to call them. Their wives are light skinned. And a lot of women will look at that and say, I'll hear these in arguments all the time. They'll say, look, y'all dating so and so dating white women, so and so dating. And as much as I would like to be like, well, that's just who we love, who we fell in love with, right? I would like to say that. But there is some truth in that when you look at statistics. It's not magic that it's that way. It ties back into the fact that we have been programmed, we've been wired, we've been conditioned this way. My mother remembers my little sisters were fighting over the women who passed She was fighting over a Barbie doll with my sister, who's now 28. And
Hmm.
guess what? They were fighting over the white Barbie doll. The
We
cute
weren't
white
allowed to have
doll,
white Barbies.
the white Barbie dolls was the black ones was on the ground. They was idle. They wouldn't even get no action.
It was idle.
We're not
Oh,
even talking
see,
about life. We talking about an action figure. The black action figures wasn't even getting no play. They was fighting over the white doll. And so it's this thing where it's like it's a lot
yeah.
of our conditioning. It's really hard. And so when we look at that, I think that also affects the black woman. Let's be honest. Most people we come in contact, we all deal with insecurities. Right? I interact with women a lot. You don't have to be black. We all deal with insecurities. So I have a different positioning now as to why a lot of black women feel with not only dealing with regular everyday insecurities, they're also fighting for their own identity and value because it's not being fed into by society and to a degree not even by the black man. So again,
Well,
I see that.
they're fight. Honestly, black women are fighting for our lives. We are fighting for our lives. I mean, like, just to be very clear, we had talked about that a little bit. I mean, black women, every single health outcome, your mother and I had discussed this. You name it. The disparities are there, and that is, that now colorism doesn't necessarily play into that, but when we're talking about medical care, who is believed when they say that they're in pain, who is believed when they're giving birth and being given treatments that don't work for their body and they end up dying, right? Serena Williams talked about this, that she almost died in childbirth because of her experiences. Additionally, one of the things that a lot of folks said they loved about Obama was Michelle, right? I mean, and also, I mean, you asked me, Michelle probably should have been president. I mean, Michelle was Obama's boss. Okay, let's not forget that Michelle was Obama's. She
Like
hired him,
most women are.
huh?
Most good wives are.
Listen, I mean, she's a lawyer who hired him in a law firm. She got him into his field, right? And so I think that I think part of it is, a narrative story that gets lifted up or not. I think it's about visibility. And one of the things the other thing I wanted to talk to you about around politics and sort of success and visibility, credibility, and even in the Black Panther Party, right, which began in Oakland. One of the all of the things, all things black, all things black power, all things really critical to self-determination and the success of black people. Even within that party, the women that were at the forefront of that movement, and this was even Angela Davis, right? The women that were sort of spokespersons and highly visible were often light skinned. And it is something that I think we talk about in our social justice movements on the periphery, but I think that it's a conversation for further exploration. Does that take away from the contributions that this woman has made to justice reform? No. This isn't a critique of her. But it has been documented and noted that there are parts of our political movements, even the more radical ones, the more pro-black ones, radical ones, that exist outside of some of the more traditional institutions in the black community, where you do see rampant colorism. And if I can be a little bit, I will name the church. That is a place where that does happen as well, as an institution, or our education institutions. Sororities, our fraternal institutions, even in a political party like the Black Panther Party, light-skinned women, right, who are academics, these are intellectuals, are actually spokesperson. And a lot of the darker black women were, right, administering the lunch programs and doing a lot of fundraising behind the scenes work. And there were a lot of white women that were engaged in that movement as well, playing a supportive role. So I just think, it's pervasive. There isn't a single place where this isn't happening. And we have to both support, love on, and acknowledge that all Black people deserve love and care and are affected by, most importantly, are affected by racism. All of us, all of us, like people of color. Your children are not exempt, right? Your children are not exempt from what, you know, white supremacy does. However, or how it operates. However, it has to, the stories have to be visible. The stories of Black women that are not only darker skinned, but we could get even deeper in talking about being phenotypically African. I have a wide nose. You know what I'm saying? I have big lips. I have a wide nose. And even we have people trying to contour their nose away right now. You know what I mean? Trying to change the way that they look, when the way that they look is in the image of the original human being. You know what I mean? Like this,
Creator,
you know
right?
what I'm saying? This is what all of society comes from. It is it is this.
I have a I have a
You
question for
know,
you. Go ahead,
I
Mom.
I I want to jump in and
Mhm.
say that I was sitting here the entire time just thinking about that.
Mhm.
When did we become, what I actually thought about, to be honest, was Michael Jackson. And
Oh, yeah.
although now I'm a huge fan of his.
I'm a big
Now
fan of
he
Michael
said
Jackson. So
that
yeah.
he had some type of disease, right? I forgot the
Mhm.
name of the disease, where you know how you become like parts of your skin is light skin, and so that's why he decided to change his color. Now I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, that's what he said, so I'm a roll with that. But I even think about little Kim and how I just seen a picture of her recently. She, to me, in my opinion, she was beautiful, but she changed her whole image, made herself lighter. Where do we get this notion from? And again, I think I know the answer to this. Lighter is better. To me, color should not matter. And I'm not judging anybody, because for so many years, I thought, I probably would have a better life if I was lighter. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know, because I'm grateful for who I am, right? I'm happy of everything. I'm glad that I'm alive. I'm glad I'm still here. I'm glad of my experiences. It's just the trauma that I received at an early
Mhm.
age surrounding colorism just made me be, ignorant for so long. But because I'm aware of it, you know, I try to educate. And I want to also say this. We got 3 minutes left, so I'm gonna let you guys say some last words. Even in my neighborhood, I have some kids, and the one that's darker, people treat her differently than the one that's a little bit lighter. So it's just about really having just the education about and teaching our children, no matter what skin tone you are, you're beautiful inside and out. I don't care if one of my grandchildren was to come out black, tart, dark, it don't matter. I'm gonna love that kid, and I want to make sure we instill in them that we love them. But I'm gonna go ahead and let you guys say some last words. But thank each one of you for being back on the show. Please come back. This was a good topic. This is good. Tim, go ahead. You can say your last words.
We're gonna have to do a colorism part two because so much to unpack. But I'll leave you guys with this. I just wanted to kind of ponder the thought of how colorism to a degree is different between the chocolate black man and the chocolate black woman.
Mm.
Because I think there's a certain level of physical specimen and attractiveness that's attached to the black man, dark
Yeah.
black man,
Yeah.
opposed to the dark black woman. And we don't got time to unpack that. We got a minute left, and I'm gonna let Carissa give us her parting words. But we just kind of just talking. We haven't even really gotten like, but there's so many different directions that we can go
We
because.
can have a part two. We can have a part two.
Go ahead, Carissa.
So I just really appreciate the conversation. I did not know which way this was going to go, and this, I think it was a really wonderful morning spent with you all. And I want to definitely just leave with saying, we have to think about how we're loving our families, and educating ourselves, and really thinking about the history, and also attacking systems, not each other. because this is really rooted in the system. And then the last thing I'll say is we also have to be real, and maybe if we do a part two about people being passed up for job opportunities, right? Like people's lives being affected. You mentioned trauma. Trauma is real, and that early childhood trauma, at the, and not especially things as core as around things as core as identity is something that we want to think about. But yeah, people's lives, their ability to get an income, the way that they're seen and perceived, their reputations can often be impacted by colorism. So I think it's an important conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for being on the show. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thank you.
Stories of the Soul radio show.
Thank you.
You want to be a guest on my show, you can always email me at Believe Radio, Yolanda at gmail.com. Thank you. Until next week. Enjoy.